A mass shooting in University City continues to raise questions about motivation and race. Also raising questions, DA Bonnie Dumanis' decision to step down early and anoint a successor. And do you have any idea which is the county's largest provider of mental health care? Turns out it's County Jail. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer, and joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today, reporter Susan Murphy of KPBS News. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Mark. Good to be here. Good
to have you. Investigative reporter Amitha Sharma, also of KPBS. Hi, Amitha.
Hi, Mark.
And Sarah Libby, managing editor of Voice of San Diego. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Glad to have you back again. And legal affairs reporter Dana Littlefield of the San Diego Union Tribune. Hi, Dana.
Hi, Mark.
Good to have you here today. Well, last weekend's shooting in University City was shocking, as all shootings are, but this one had a few elements that elevated it to national news in our gun-happy country. The killer calmly sat drinking beer and called his ex-girlfriend as he emptied his gun. And it happened in a nice apartment complex in an upscale San Diego community. Then there was the question of race and hate. The shooter was white. Most of his victims were people of color. Susan, start with the details of this. This made big news at the end of the weekend last week.
Right. On Sunday night, a 49-year-old white man walked into this pool complex area. Witnesses say he walked toward the back gate of where the pool is. He sat calmly.
Middle of a birthday party?
Middle of a birthday party. Right across from him, people were celebrating a birthday party. He sat for about 30 minutes and then began a shooting rampage. And he shot at the people who were celebrating the birthday party, and those people were African Americans mostly and Latinos. There were about 30 people who were attending or who were in the pool area. Some kids also were in the pool. And he shot 7 people, 5 of those African Americans, 1 Latino and 1 white woman. 1 woman died, Monique Clark, a 35-year-old mother of 3.
And then the police, of course, came and killed Peter Sellis.
Peter Sellis, 49-year-old. He seemed to be distraught over a recent breakup with his girlfriend. In the last 10 years, he had filed for bankruptcy 2 times. He had also been divorced, and just his life seemed to be spiraling out of control. Okay,
so that seemed to be, with those details, that seemed to be what the police are saying may have been the motivation here, though. But San Diego Police Chief Shelley Zimmerman, just a day after the shooting, said there was no indication that this was a hate crime. And of course, Dana, you've covered Shelley Zimmerman and all. Was this wishful thinking on her part, or what do you think she would conclude that so quickly after the shooting?
Well, I don't know specifically, the details of the investigation. I do know that when police look into these types of events and they're looking for evidence of a hate crime, there needs to be some evidence, statements that were made, or perhaps, writings back in his own apartment or something like that.
Postings on social media.
Something in the totality of the circumstances that would indicate that some kind of bias was a factor here. And Zimmerman said that did not, at least through San Diego Police Department's investigation, seemed to be the case. Obviously, there are those who were there, survivors of this incident, who say otherwise.
Yeah, some of these folks were rankled by this, the conclusion, right?
Right, and I talked to several witnesses who said it seemed that he was targeting these African Americans who were at this party. There was 1 white woman who was shot, but they say that he kind of warned her, don't come near, don't try to help them, or you'll be shot as well.
So it seemed like there were some of the activities based on the witness statements that he was really targeting the people of color in that particular incident.
Right, and supposedly there were 2 other white women sitting nearby, and he did not shoot at them. Okay, we've got a couple of bites here I wanted to get to. First is a clip from your report. You talked to Lizette Aguinaga, I'm not pronouncing it. And she was a resident there who saw the shooting. She was a resident, and she was in the pool at the time of the shooting.
Okay, let's hear that.
But he did shoot at a white female, but that's because she was trying to come in and help the wounded. So I don't know if this is racial or not, but it's awfully coincidental.
Okay, so that shows some of the ambiguity there. We've got another bite here. This is the Reverend Jared Moten of the National Action Network.
It is very curious to me and to many others in a community in which this transpired that the gentleman had to be selective. There's some premeditation that went along with his acts in sitting down and then calculating who's there.
Basically, just for housekeeping, what is the National Action Network?
So it's a civil rights organization. The National Network is led by Reverend Al Sharpton.
Okay.
So it's the local civil rights, justice for all. They are all about, gun rights, tighter gun control, and those.
And have the police responded then? Maybe walk back this earlier conclusion, or?
When I talked to police, they said that when Shelley Zimmerman made that announcement that there was zero evidence, that they weren't saying that the case was closed, that they had shut the books, just that at that time there was no evidence. But the investigation is ongoing, and it'll take weeks before they can find a motive.
Now, how does this shooting, there's so many shootings in America. I looked up a couple of statistics the other day. There was a 2012 comparison of countries. Australia had 1.4 gun homicides per million people, Canada 5.1, the United States 29.7. We have shootings all the time here in our society here, and mass shootings. Dozens of people are murdered every day, hundreds are shot in this country every day. What elevates a shooting like this to national news, or at least to news locally that we're talking about for several days afterward?
Well, I think part of the reason has to do with this racial element. I mean, it's certainly part of the national conversation. It has been for decades. I'm not suggesting that's a new thing, but it's certainly been a part of the discussion and continues to be part of the discussion. So here you've got a situation where a white man did, for whatever reason, choose victims that were, for the most part, either Black or Latino, and that has a lot of people really looking at the motivation. Was that his sole motivation? Why did he do this? These were people, celebrating at a birthday party. And anytime you have a situation where, you've got that abrupt shift of, mood. You have people who are happy, celebrating, and here comes a person who destroys that. That resonates with people. Right. And adding in the racial element really makes it that much more disturbing, if that is the case.
And the other thing is, these people celebrating had invited everybody at the pool to join in with them, to join the food and the drinks.
Very
and
open
festivities.
about the whole thing.
They're very
wasn't
open.
he asked to join in as well?
He was asked to join in as well, yes.
So I'm curious, bringing it back to Chief Zimmerman, is there a sense on the part of police that perhaps they reached that conclusion? And maybe they're not, they are saying that this investigation is ongoing, but perhaps they put it out there that this was not racially motivated too soon?
That's what everybody's kind of saying, is that it was too soon, and that maybe she left out the words "as of right now." As of right now, we don't have any evidence. And so far in this investigation, that hasn't even been 24 hours.
And what about the family of the victims? Have they come out and have they said what they believe they think the motivation might be?
And I know the National Action Network was trying to get in touch with them. They said they were not representing the family, that they hadn't been in touch with them. I have not heard personally that they have spoken out about this yet, but I guess that's to come. Well,
we're going to move on, but we will look for some follow-ups on that and what the police investigation does ultimately show. Well, longtime District Attorney Bonnie Dumanis is resigning on July 7th. She's eyeing a run for county supervisor, and she's trying to hand-pick her successor by throwing the holy water on a favored deputy to take over in the interim and enjoy the benefits of incumbency ahead of next year's election. A lot to unpack here. Amitha, start with what's the reasons the DA says she's stepping down?
Well, she says that she's considering a run for the County Board of Supervisors, and that would be Ron Roberts' seat.
And she's been in the job 14 years, is that right?
Yeah, this is we're nearing the end of her 4th term.
Okay. Any other possible reasons why she might suddenly step down here in the middle of her term?
Well, there is a sense that she
we're in the speculation business.
Yeah, we're now going to start the speculation. So there is a sense that she is stepping aside to allow the person whom she has endorsed for district attorney in next year's race, Summer Stephan, she's the chief deputy district attorney, to get that interim job. There is a strong belief that the County Board of Supervisors, whose job it is to appoint an interim replacement, has tacitly agreed behind closed doors that Summer Stephan will get that interim job. If she gets that interim job, there's a lot of criticism from a lot of different corners, the ACLU, the Democratic Party, and people within Republican circles, that this is just patently unfair, that it's vintage San Diego politics, that we have to stop anointing successors. They believe that if she's moved into that job, that she then has the, the boost that comes with incumbency, name recognition, the ability to point to the fact that, look, I've been in this seat for however long, for 2 months, 12 months.
You can call a press conference and announce what we're doing.
She gets free publicity.
Sure.
So 2 things have happened. 2 candidates have emerged for the interim job. One is Adam Gordon. He is a former prosecutor in the office. He's a civil litigator. He has said that he's interested in this interim post, and he has promised not to run for DA next year. He says, look, it's high time that San Diegans get to choose a candidate, a DA candidate. For the first time in 48 years, there hasn't been an incumbent running. I mean, he wants to create a situation where there is an ability to choose from a field of candidates
Open it up.
Who aren't incumbents. And so he says, I won't run. Another guy by the name of Greg Walden, who's also a former prosecutor in the office, he has announced that he would like the job, and he has also pledged not to run.
All right, so as long as we're on Summer Stephan here, and we'll get back to Bonnie Dumanis and her history in that office, but Sarah, you did a long interview here with Summer Stephan, who, as we've said, is kind of being tapped by Bonnie Dumanis. How would she perhaps differ from some of the more controversial or notable things that Dumanis has done or policy she has?
Yeah, so when I spoke with her, she kind of crept right up to the line of suggesting she would do things differently without ever saying outright, I wouldn't have done this, or under me as a DA, we wouldn't pursue these policies. So some of those include, we talked about police body cameras. And so a lot of the policies
very controversial issue, obviously.
Yeah, the disclosure policies have sort of been set by Bonnie Dumanis in the absence of, input from the mayor and things like that. So, when I spoke with her, one thing that was surprised me is she did signal a willingness to reopen kind of those policies and a willingness to maybe change some things. Right now when body camera footage is released, a lot of local law enforcement officials have said, well, if we're in a situation where we're approaching a riot, then we'll release it, which in my opinion sort of perversely encourages people to demonstrate violently in order to get this footage that is supposed to be public to begin with. And so she did say, I'm willing to revisit that. She also surprisingly talked about a willingness to work within Prop 47, which is, a recent state measure that converts some crimes to misdemeanors. So a lot of prosecutors across the state have really panned Prop 47 as something that's, ruining California and making their lives harder. And she did suggest a willingness to work within the law and abide by it and respect it. And she thought that prosecutors could be doing more to kind of work within Prop 47.
Did she have anything at all to say about this whole controversy that Amitha was outlining? Where
so she talked to us a lot about that, and she actually had some pretty choice words for some of those critics and said, they're welcome to run against me if they don't like it, which I think kind of willfully ignores this question of no one seems to be critiquing her as a candidate so much as they're critiquing the process itself and sort of the supervisor's decision to put the thumb on the scale a little bit by choosing somebody who could be an incumbent.
About that. I mean, she's been praised a lot for her work on sex trafficking cases. She's really gone after pimps very, very hard.
Summer Stephan.
And she's really made a name for herself in that arena. And again, it is a critique of the process. And there seems to be a level of jadedness on this issue. This happened with Sheriff Gore. He was appointed to replace Sheriff Collender, Bill Collender, before he retired, and then he ran for that
the big
seat,
leg up,
and he won, and he was endorsed by Bonnie Dumanis. It happened with the chief administrative officer at the county, Walt Eckert, and some of these people are saying they would not be surprised if Ron Roberts leaves his seat on the Board of Supervisors early to take another job, and then Bonnie Dumanis, this would be the seat that she's running for, is moved into that position.
It becomes the incumbent.
I mean, there's that level. There's that level of cynicism in this town.
Well, and regarding Summer Stephan, there's some irony here because Bonnie Dumanis herself had a very tight election against the then incumbent Paul Finks, the previous district attorney, and she won in a very close election over the Stephanie Crow murder case, which is a highly controversial case. Finks had falsely accused and charged the brother of the victim, Michael Crow, with that murder. The Crow family had come and done last 10-day ads on behalf of Bonnie Dumanis. A lot of people thought that put her over the top. And the prosecutor in that case was Summer Stephan, oddly enough. So now she will turn around and anoint that. And I know I've already heard from the Crow family, who don't live in this state anymore, and they've gotten wind of this news, and they're very upset by this. So there's a lot of people and a lot of interesting angles to this whole process.
Yes.
Let's shift back to Bonnie Dumanis and her whole legacy here. She's had her high points, her moments. Anybody who's 14 years in a highly controversial or visible job, I should say, is going to have good days and bad days, good cases and bad cases. What are some of the achievements that she would point to as her legacy here?
Well, I have to say, when it comes to Bonnie Dumanis, I mean, first off, she has this amazing story. She started off as a typist, and then she became a prosecutor, and then she became a judge, and then she ran for DA, and now she's about to wind down her fourth term. I think nobody can talk about her career and not mention the murder cases of Amber Dubois and Chelsea King back in 2010, and the way she handled them. She was able to extract a guilty plea by the killer, John Gardner, in exchange for not pursuing the death penalty. And so he was sentenced to 2 life sentences.
Not put the family through.
Right.
Trial.
The knock, however, against her is that it's basically the way she has amassed the amount of influence that she has in this town, this region, and perhaps even this state. It's some people would say that she's probably the most powerful politician in this county, and she's the district attorney. I mean, she has openly endorsed political candidates. She endorsed Jerry Sanders for mayor when he ran. She endorsed Sheriff Gore.
And she openly endorsed them after saying she would
that
not
she
endorse
would not
them.
endorse them.
Right.
She made that pledge back in 2007.
Right.
And nobody gets onto the San Diego Superior Court bench without Bonnie Dumanis' blessing.
Well, I mean, that's a blessing and a curse to be that powerful a politician, but then there are downsides to that. And of course, we had that scandal in the time when she ran for mayor in 2012 in the Filner race.
Right, but that scandal wasn't really unsealed. It didn't become public until early 2014, 2 years after.
All right. Well, will be very interesting to see. Last question before we have to leave this segment. What's the timetable when the supervisors have to make?
Well, the application process is open right now for the interim replacement. On June 20th, whoever the applicants are will go before the supervisors and do a 3-minute spiel, and they'll be interviewed publicly. The board will narrow the field down to 5 applicants. They've reserved the right to make the appointment then. If not, then they'll push it off to June 27th, do some more public interviews.
But again, July 7th is the date she's going, so got to be done before then.
Right, but it should be said that there are many who believe the fix is in on this one, that they've already tacitly agreed to choose Summer Stephan.
Okay. All right. Well, lots to watch in the news as we move ahead in that process. Well, the county jail was never intended to be a mental health ward, but that's what's happened over the years, and the jail system has been a poor provider for the mentally ill. Dana, start with the scope of the problem. How many folks are deemed to be mentally ill who are in jail?
Well, the daily average of inmates is 5,700 inmates countywide. And the Sheriff Gore, has said that at any given time, about 1/3 of those people are on some type of psychotropic drug. So, and are also receiving other mental health services within the jail. And that is a very large percentage of that population, for sure.
That's remarkable. You had a very powerful story in the UT about this, and you opened with a tragic suicide. Tell us about that case.
Yes, so that was a case involving Michelle Moriarty and her husband, Heron Moriarty. They were East County residents. This was just about this time last year when the husband started exhibiting some unusual behavior, some strange behavior. His wife mentioned that he was talking nonstop, which was unusual for him, into the very early hours of the morning. And eventually he was diagnosed as manic and to have had a psychotic break. And so the issues with his behavior continued on until there was an incident where he threw a coffee table through a sliding glass door at his brother's home, again out in East County, and was arrested.
Okay. So he winds up in county jail, and then he ends up committing suicide.
Yes. So in the 5 or 6 days that he was housed in the jail, this was in Vista, Michelle Moriarty, his wife, was calling the jail to check and see how he was. He was refusing his medication, and what she stated to me in an interview was that she kept telling the nurses, "I'm afraid for his life. I'm afraid for his life." And yet he wasn't in any type of suicide watch cell, and eventually he did take his own life.
And this wasn't an isolated incident. How many inmate suicides have there been in recent years?
Well, going back to 2014, there have been 17. Okay. So there were 6 in 2014, there was another 6 in 2015, and 5 in 2016. So far this year, none have been recorded. And of course, that is completed suicides. We're not talking about attempts.
And the families of several of these inmates have sued, saying that they made multiple pleas and said they raised the red flags and the alerts over and over again.
Absolutely.
And these happen anyway.
Yes. And we're talking about situations that happened before some of the newer changes have been made to the system of giving psychiatric care to inmates in the jails, the recent changes that have been made, and some that have happened after those changes. So there is still, room for improvement for sure.
Okay, I want to get to a little more detail on some of the changes that have been made, but we do have a bite from Sheriff Bill Gore, and he acknowledges the problem. Here he is in a clip describing what's going on in the downtown jail.
We're the largest provider of mental health beds in San Diego County. Is my downtown central jail. There's something wrong with that. That shouldn't be the case. About a third of my inmates, 28 to 35%, it fluctuates, are on some type of psychotropic drug. When I've got an average daily population of 5,700 inmates, that's a lot of people.
So he's making the point you did at the outset on the numbers here. Now, I'm sure the jailers don't want to be psychologists and handing out prescriptions, and obviously they're trying to keep track of all the meds for these folks. I don't know how well trained they are. What are some of the improvements they're trying to do here, and some of the things that they're doing to keep the suicide rate?
Well, some of the changes have been, I'll say, physical within the jail. In these newly formed enhanced observation units, that's what they call them, there's fencing that's been put up on the upper tier so that people can't jump from the upper level to the lower level. In some of the cells themselves, there's video in there so people can be watched more closely. Whatever points where someone might be able to fashion a noose and hang him or herself, those hanging points have been eliminated. So these are some of the physical changes that have taken place inside the jails. In addition to that, though, there's been talk about making sure that people who are on suicide watch are being checked in on more frequently by the doctors, by the mental health providers, and doing a better job of figuring out who should go into those enhanced observation units in the first place. Intake is a big deal. Identifying at that point who is at risk, at high risk.
Susan?
I was just wondering, are all these mentally ill, are they in solitary confinement, or are they housed with
They in the general
inmates?
population? Yeah.
No, they are in specialized units with other people who have psychological issues, mental health issues. And that's a big thing that is, a change in recent years, is that there's been a movement away from keeping people who have mental illness isolated, because isolation can really lead to what the doctors call decompensation, where their problems are exacerbated because they are alone and not interacting with anyone.
Now, I know it's a very complex question. We don't have a lot of time left, but how did we get here? It's a lot of years coming up to the point where a lot of the mentally ill wind up in jail instead of in institutions in our country.
Absolutely. This is not something that, just popped up recently. This has been in the works for many, many decades. We're talking about back to the late 1950s, early 1960s, where the state of California made a concerted effort to move people out of the state mental hospitals. And the idea was that instead of involuntarily committing someone to a state hospital, they would go to more community-based facilities. So we're talking about board and care facilities and that sort of thing.
But why? Like, what was supposed to be the upshot of that?
Well, the upshot, it saves a lot of money, first off. And then secondly, it was supposed to be a way to give people more one-on-one treatment and treatment in their own community, you know, where they're not completely away from their loved ones, family members, etc., you know, because they've been sent off to a state hospital in another county. But the problem was the money didn't come to those facilities. And so people were turned away, or they didn't get the care they needed right away. And that's the main issue, is getting someone the care immediately.
Well, it was a terrific story. We'll look for follow-ups there, and we've run out of time, but we'll revisit this very important issue, I'm sure. And that does wrap up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guest, Susan Murphy of KPBS News, Amitha Sharma, also of KPBS, Sarah Libby of Voice of San Diego, and Dana Littlefield of the San Diego Union Tribune. And a reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.